And you know what I told him?
No, Presidente Trump.
And President Trump is criticizing Mexico's president after she rejected his plan for U.S. troops to help fight cartels in Mexico.
The Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has made herself crystal clear. American troops are not allowed inside Mexico for any reason. This came after President Trump offered to send the U.S. military into Mexico to eliminate the cartels. But Sheinbaum said no. She's now accused Trump of trying to violate Mexico's sovereignty, but said she will never let that happen. But here's the problem. The cartel war is now bigger than Mexico alone. Thousands of innocent people on both sides of the border are being kidnapped, tortured, and murdered on a daily basis. Americans especially are being poisoned by the dangerous substances these criminals are smuggling into our country, and the bodies keep piling up. So now the real question is, did Sheinbaum make a bold stand to protect her country, or did she just slam the door on the only real chance to finally end the war once and for all? Also, what is Trump going to do next? Let's break it down. The moment Sheinbaum said no to Trump's war plan, the idea to send American troops into Mexico or order airstrikes on the cartels is not something new to Trump. For years, he's always wanted to treat the cartels and other violent gangs like terrorists.
The president pulls me aside on at least a couple occasions and suggests that maybe we have the U.S. military shoot missiles into Mexico.
Shoot missiles into Mexico for what?
He would say to go after the cartels.
Trump finally signed an executive order in February 2025, designating some of the most notorious Mexican cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. Since then, Trump has many times hinted at the possibility of a deadly U.S. military operation against the cartels in Mexico. He believes that the only way to stop the cartels is by taking the war to them. But when he made that offer to the Mexican president, Claudia Sheinbaum, her answer was a firm no. Sheinbaum didn't want American troops crossing into Mexican territory under any circumstances. Now, that might sound a little strange because Mexico is losing tens of thousands of people each year to cartel violence. Some Mexican cities are completely under the control of the cartels. Mexican police and military have no business in those areas to avoid a direct confrontation with the cartels. Mothers, fathers, and even kids are disappearing on a daily basis. Tourists are also being slaughtered like animals. Since 2000, close to 1 million people have been killed or disappeared in Mexico. In the last year alone, over 30,000 murders were reported. So, why would a president who means well for her people say no to an offer of help to end the cartels perpetrating such evil? Well, for President Sheinbaum, it came down to one thing: control. She saw Trump's offer as a threat to Mexico's independence. Letting U.S. troops operate freely inside her country would make it look like Mexico has lost control of its territory. And for a new president who's still trying to show strength and prove herself to her people, that is unacceptable.
And you know what I told him?
No, Presidente Trump.
No, President Trump. The territory is sacrosanct. Sovereignty is sacrosanct. Sovereignty is not for sale. Sovereignty is loved and defended.
But her response didn't sit well with Trump's camp and with many Americans watching from across the border.
Well, I think this is really a failure on her part. I would have obviously taken President Trump on this. Your territory is not violated, as she says, if you are welcoming and you invite folks to come in and have some support there. What they are saying is, look, we're tired of the cartels. We're tired of ungoverned spaces so close to our southern border, the U.S. southern border, that the Mexican government alone cannot solve this problem, so let us help you. And so
Trump later said publicly that Sheinbaum was just too scared of the cartels. To him, that was the only reason she rejected his offer.
She's so afraid of the cartel she can't walk, so that's the reason. And I think she's a lovely woman.
And a lot of Americans shared his sentiments, with some even saying that she is not really in control of the country and that the cartels have more power than the actual government.
Well, they are almost like a government in and of themselves, and that's part of the problem. I want to get a final quick one in, Chad. The administration's creating a second military zone along the southern border in Texas.
But Sheinbaum has stood her ground. She made it clear that Mexico would work with the U.S., but only from a distance.
We can collaborate, we can work together, but you can do it in your territory, we can do it in ours. We can share information, but we will never accept the presence of the U.S. Army in our territory.
Since President Trump's return to the White House, the United States government and Mexico have been collaborating on many fronts to crack down on the cartels, but American boots on Mexican soil is the red line Mexico is not willing to cross, no matter what.
Well, very little information from defense officials, but one of the things that we can't talk about, Diane, is that the United States has actually been undertaking surveillance flights along the southwest border with Mexico, but remaining above U.S. territory. But back in February, Mexico acknowledged that it had requested U.S. intelligence flights over Mexican territory, and we learned later that some of those flights had provided information to potentially the arrest of some senior cartel leaders. So while the Sheinbaum is saying no U.S. troops in Mexico, she has essentially asked the United States to conduct intelligence flights. We think they were being run by the CIA.
President Sheinbaum might be Mexico's first female president, but right now, she's facing one of the most dangerous leadership tests in the country's modern history. She's standing at the center of a storm. On one side, she has pressure from the United States government, demanding military access to hunt cartels on Mexican soil. On the other side, she's dealing with deep, uncontrollable violence inside her own borders. When Sheinbaum took office in late 2024, she inherited a problem far bigger than anything her predecessor, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, could fix. For years, President Obrador followed a policy of hugs, not bullets, a non-aggressive approach to dealing with the cartels. But that only gave them more room to grow. And now Sheinbaum is stuck with the consequences. Families are scared, police are outgunned, and citizens don't trust the system anymore. Sheinbaum knows this, but she's also a politician, and politics in Mexico and elsewhere is shaped by history and pride. Letting American soldiers cross the border, no matter the reason, would be seen by many as surrender. It could trigger protests and shake up her support, and worst of all, it could make her a target. Some people believe that's exactly why Sheinbaum said no to Trump's military offer, not just to defend Mexico's sovereignty, but to protect herself. After all, Mexican officials have been kidnapped, tortured, and some even killed for less. And let's not forget that Mexico has a painful history with U.S. military intervention. In the 1800s, the U.S. invaded Mexico and took half of its lands, including places like California, Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico. That loss still hurts Mexico deeply today. Later, the U.S. sent troops into Mexico again, like during the 1914 occupation of Veracruz and the 1916 hunt for Pancho Villa. Each of those times, Mexicans felt that their sovereignty was violated, and now they feel like history wants to repeat itself again. Cartel death camps and horror graves. Now, if you want to understand why Trump is hell-bent on destroying the cartels and the reason President Sheinbaum may not want to awaken them, then you just have to look at who they're really dealing with. In March 2025, an activist group in Mexico discovered what many are now calling a modern-day extermination camp in a remote ranch in Jalisco state. This place is not far from the city of Guadalajara.
Families of missing people held a vigil after reports say a mass extermination site was discovered in Jalisco, Mexico. This gathering happened in Mexico City to urge the government to do something about cartel violence. It's something that I find very hard to believe and accept, too hard. It's something that feels sad and frustrating, and very angry, like when Sofia disappeared. This is a cemetery. Mexico is a clandestine cemetery. The only ones who don't realize it are the authorities.
Most of the families in the group had been searching for their loved ones who had mysteriously vanished without a trace. But nothing could have prepared them for what they were about to uncover after an anonymous tip finally led them to the ranch. They dug up hundreds of personal items, including shoes, clothing, and children's toys. There were also burnt human remains and 3 underground cremation ovens where the bodies were made to disappear. The ranch had been used by the CJNG, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel.
Sadly, the Jalisco Cartel New Generation, the CJNG, for who this site belonged, has been linked to the overwhelming majority of cartel violence in the last decade. They have killed tens of thousands of people. And yes, some of their leaders have been arrested, some of their leaders have been killed and extradited. It hasn't made a difference.
According to investigators and survivors, the place was a training ground. New recruits were abducted and brought there, while many others were lured with fake job offers. Upon arrival, they were forced to fight each other, tortured, and forced to execute the cartel's captives. It was all part of a brutal program meant to harden them, to prepare them for the cartel's war across Mexico. Some of those recruits were just boys. Some had been taken against their will. If they refused to follow orders, they were killed on the spot. Others collapsed from exhaustion and were left to die. And those who survived the training They were sent off to cartel hotspots like Zacatecas and Michoacan, where life expectancy for a new hitman could be measured in weeks. Now, what's even more disturbing is that this wasn't the first time this particular ranch was discovered.
So you're either talking about staggering incompetence or high-level government corruption that allowed hundreds of people to be taken to this place, killed, murdered, and their bodies then burned.
Mexican authorities had reportedly raided the place in September 2024. They arrested 10 cartel members and freed 2 hostages during that operation, but they failed to uncover the full extent of atrocities going on there. So, the CJNG continued operating on the site for a few more months, right under the government's nose. But locals had always known something was going on there. The land used to belong to a man named Don Genaro Ramirez. In 2012, members of CJNG came to his home and threatened his family. They wanted his land, and when he refused, they grabbed his daughter, so he had no choice but to hand it over. After that, the land was erased from public records until local officials reached out over a decade later, demanding unpaid taxes. That was when people started talking, leading to the horrific discovery. In the same March 2025, something even more horrifying was also discovered in Puebla, state of Mexico. This particular story started in late February 2025 when 9 students from Tlaxcala, Mexico, 4 women and 5 men went on a beach trip to Oaxaca.
Surveillance footage shows their vehicle on a highway near Atlaco 3 days earlier, about 90 miles from where their remains were found.
They left home around February 27th, excited for a fun vacation, but after that, their families stopped hearing from them. No calls, no messages, nothing. That was when their loved ones knew something was wrong and started panicking. They went to the police in Tlaxcala and Oaxaca and filed missing person reports. Some of them even posted pictures and messages online, begging for help. One of the mother made a post on Facebook saying, "My daughter disappeared last night on a beach in Huatulco called Zipolaide. They took her, and until now we know nothing about my daughter." The mother further revealed that her daughter had 2 young children between the ages of 5 and 3 who were waiting for her return. Sadly, the time she left home would be the last time her kids would ever see their mother alive. On March 2nd, Mexican police found an abandoned old Volkswagen near a small town in southeastern Mexico called San Jose Miahuatlan. When they opened the trunk, they found 4 dead bodies inside. Right next to the car, they found 5 more bodies under a tarp. Even worse, they found a bag nearby with 8 pairs of human hands. All the bodies showed visible signs of trauma, and some of them were riddled with bullets. As police investigated further, they found IDs on some of the bodies, and the names matched the student who had been reported missing. All of them were young people between 19 and 30 years old. Investigators believe they may have been tricked by a man named Jose Lavariega, also known as El Hocha. He was once a mayoral candidate, but later got involved with organized crime. Investigators say he might have convinced the group to get involved in petty crimes, maybe robbing people or stores during their trip. And the problem is, in that region of Oaxaca, local gangs don't allow outsiders to cause trouble. They have their own rules, and breaking them can get you killed. It looks like the students were punished for getting involved in something they didn't fully understand. That theory makes sense since El Hocha was found dead days later in his car with a note next to his body that said, "This is what you get for being a thief. Cartel violence on American soil." While Mexico is drowning in cartel bloodshed, the US is also fighting its own war against the cartels. On May 6, 2025, the DEA carried out its biggest fentanyl bust in history. The operation was a multi-state operation that stretched across Utah, New Mexico, Arizona, Oregon, and Nevada.
And we're very proud to announce today a historic Sinaloa cartel arrest, and it marks the most significant victory in our nation's fight against fentanyl and drug trafficking to date.
By the end of the operation, they seized over 3 million counterfeit pills, disguised as prescription drugs, but laced with fentanyl. 880 pounds of fentanyl in total, millions in cash, dozens of guns, tactical gear, and luxury vehicles. And they arrested 16 cartel members, including a notorious leader of the Sinaloa cartel, who had been deported twice from the United States.
The head of this organization, Sinaloa organization, here in the country illegally, 6 of these guys and women here in the country illegally. His name is Alberto Salazar Amaya. He is the leader, and he was living in Salem, Oregon.
Here is a total breakdown of everything they recovered from the raid in cities like Albuquerque, Salem, Layton, Phoenix, Las Vegas. You can pause the video here to have a good look.
In all, federal agents also seized nearly $5 million in cash, the majority of that seized in Salem, along with high-end jewelry and luxury vehicles.
Fentanyl is now the #1 killer of young men and women in America between the ages of 18 and 34. And many of these deaths are happening quietly, inside dorm rooms, inside apartments, even inside family homes. You know why? Because most victims don't even know what they are taking. A lot of them think they're taking oxycodone for pain, or Adderall to maintain focus, or even Xanax for anxiety. But what they're really swallowing is poison disguised as medicine. One tiny pill is enough to kill an adult, and this is just business for the cartels. They're flooding the US with fake pills because it's cheap, addictive, and almost impossible to trace. And every overdose is just another statistic, another body, another neighborhood left in shock. But that's only half the story. Cartels aren't just dealing drugs anymore. They're now involved in kidnapping Americans.
Authorities on both sides of the border are ramping up security after a troubling change in cartel tactics. With fewer migrants crossing into the U.S., Mexican cartels are now targeting everyday civilians, and that includes Americans, for kidnapping and ransom.
Just recently, 4 U.S. citizens were kidnapped in northern Mexico, near the Texas border. 2 were murdered. The others were held for ransom. In another case, 2 Americans were taken from a sports bar in Juarez, dragged to a stash house, and authorities later found them bruised and beaten, surrounded by migrants, after a terrifying ransom note had been sent to their families. It's a new tactic. With fewer migrants crossing the border due to crackdowns, cartels are losing smuggling revenue. So now, they're targeting random civilians, especially people they think have something to lose. If you have a job, a family, or money, they think you're worth grabbing. And if you're visiting Mexico on vacation, then you might have to rethink it. The U.S. State Department has issued do not travel warnings for at least 6 Mexican states, including hotspots like Sinaloa, Chihuahua, and Zacatecas. Even U.S. government employees aren't allowed to move between cities after dark unless they use authorized transport. The risks are that high. And still, every few weeks, another horror story breaks through. A tourist goes missing, a family is ambushed, a group of friends disappears, and days later, they're found murdered. The violence that once felt over there is now inside the United States. You don't have to be in Mexico to feel it anymore. But now that the Mexican president has rejected America's help to solve the problem, what happens next? Do you think Trump will go ahead to do it? And why do you think Trump is still requesting permission from Mexico to hit the cartels even after designating them terrorist organizations? Feel free to share your thoughts with us in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more in-depth videos like this. Meanwhile, you should click on any of the cards on your screen right now to watch more of our videos.